Hi folks, Mrs. Findlay here. We're going to go over some basic work on indices today in our lesson, and then I'm going to give you some practice questions to have a go at yourselves. So first of all, let's just remind ourselves that indices means powers, okay? So remember a power, for example, if you've got 2 to the power 4, what that means is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So the power tells you how many times you multiply this by itself. Okay, so we can use that to simplify. Now, if we have a look at our first question here, to simplify, we've got a times a times a times a. So that's a multiplying by itself 4 times. So we can rewrite that as a to the power 4. Okay? Means exactly the same thing, but it looks a lot simpler. Okay? Here in the next one, we've got t times t times t times t times t times t. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that gives us t to the power 6. Okay? If we look at the next one, we've got a mixture here of R's and D's. Okay? So if we look at the D's first, we've got 1, 2, 3. So that's D to the power 3. And it's being multiplied by, let's see, we've got R times R times R. So that's also R to the power 3. Okay, now we don't need anything in between here, in between the D to the power 3 and R to the power 3, because in maths, when there is no gap between things, it means they're multiplying. Okay, so we don't need the times in there. Okay, and then the next one, let's see, we've got A's, B's and C's here. So A's, we've got 1, 2. So it's just A squared for the A's. For the B's, we've got 1, 2, 3. So it's B cubed, that's how we say to the power 3. And then the C's, we've got 1 there and 1 there. So we've got C squared also. Okay, so when we are simplifying using indices, we're just counting how many times each letter is being multiplied by itself. Okay, now we're going to go on and have a little look at rules of indices. So, for example, if we had a to the power 3 times a to the power 5, how could we simplify that? Well, let's do it by writing it out in full. So, a to the power 3 is a times a times a. And we're multiplying that by a to the power 5. So that's a times a times a times a times a. Now, I expect you've noticed that I wrote down 8 a's when they were multiplying by each other there. So we've got a to the power 8. Just check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So a cubed, or a to the power 3, times a to the power 5 is a to the power 8. Okay? What if we had v squared times v to the power 4? Well, it would be v squared. So that's v times v, and then times v to the power 4. So that's times v times v times v times v. Okay? So if we count those up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So v is multiplying by itself 6 times. So that's v to the power 6. Now I wonder if you can notice what is the connection between, just a minute, change my colour of pen, between these numbers and that number. Between these numbers and that number. Can you work out what the rule must be? And can you use that to work out what t to the power 3 times t to the power 4 would be? Well, if we write out t to the power 3, we're going to be writing t times t times t. So t times by itself 3 times. And then we would have t times by itself another 4 times. So altogether, t would be multiplying by itself 7 times. Okay? So what we can say as a rule is that these powers get added together, don't they, to give you the power in the simplified version. Okay, and the way that we say that in algebra is that a to the m times a to the n equals a to the m plus n. Okay, now I didn't put that times sign, the multiplication sign, in here because we don't need it, but if you want it in there just to make this really clear, that's what we mean. So we add the powers together. So if we've got a to one power times a to another power, we add the two powers together to get the new power. Okay, so it does need to be the same thing though, here and here. Okay, let's do a little bit of practice of that. So if we've got a to the 7 times a to the power 3, then we're going to add those powers together. So that'll be a to the power 7 plus 3, which is 10. So we go straight to 10. We don't need to write down a to the 7 plus 3. Okay? Doesn't just work for a's, of course. M squared times m to the power 5 would be m. We need to add the powers now. So that'll give us 2 add 5 is 7. Or c to the power 11 times c to the power 3. Again, add the powers, gives us c to the power 14. Okay, now we can also use this when we've got more than one letter. So if we had a cubed times b squared times a to the power 4 times b to the power 9, then we could write that. If you look at the a's, the powers there are 3 and 4, so 3 add 4 is 7. And then the b's, we've got 2 and 9 for the powers. 2 add 9 is 11. So simplified, that would give you a to the power 7, b to the power 11. And we don't need the multiplication sign in there, remember. Okay. So we'll just do a tiny bit more practice of this. So we're going to have v squared times w cubed times v times w to the power 5 times v squared. Okay, now you will notice here that there is no power on the v. But how many times is v multiplying itself here? Well, it's just once, isn't it? So we can put a power 1 there and that helps us with our adding. So in v's, let's have a look. We've got 2, 1 and 2. So that makes 5 altogether when they add them up. And then in the w's, we've got 3 and 5. So we've got w to the power 8. Okay, so don't get yourselves all muddled up. Don't make it any more complicated than it needs to be. It's not complicated at all. Just take each letter on its own. If it helps you to rearrange the order, that's totally okay. So for example, this last one that we just did here, if we want to change the order to make it a bit easier for ourselves, we can put all the v's first, because when you're multiplying, it doesn't matter about the order. So we could say v squared times v to the power 1 times v squared, and then put the w's next, times w to the power 3 times w to the power 5. So then we can see a bit more clearly that we've got v to the power 5 and w to the power 8. But you don't have to rewrite that to be able to do it. Okay, anyway, I'll give you a chance to practice these, and then tomorrow we'll go on to the next rule, which will involve dividing. Okay, so well done. See you soon.